I was trying to remember, do you remember the context that Minority Report got mentioned in the previous show?
Not exactly.
I don't either, and I didn't get a chance to go back and listen. But it was hilarious because when I stumbled across the two articles, but I'm going to combine them as to one and just put both links in the notes because there's just a little bit of information out of one of them that's a little bit different. But one of the articles specifically references Minority Report, and I couldn't help but laugh and thought that was a great tie-in as well.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
It's a little bit scary, right? Like the Big Brother aspect of this.
Yes and no. So just for the sake of not being overly vague about the rest of what we're talking about, the two articles are talking about a algorithm developed by researchers in the University of Chicago. Results of the program and everything have been published now. Basically, the takeaway is that in the 8, I think it was, U.S. cities.
7.
This 7 plus Chicago.
Okay,
so
8.
I think.
Yeah.
7 or 8. So basically using the published crime data, the algorithm was able to map out relationships and how different types of criminal activity influenced other types of criminal activity within these cities where the data was publicly available, and successfully predicted with a range of up to 80 to 90% accuracy the occurrence of criminal activity up to about a week out. So let me kind of try to summarize the main points, and then we'll go into it further. The city of Chicago publishes a lot of data in their logs. Those are published daily or updated daily on about a week delay. So, whatever statistics and logs were generated last Monday would be published the following Monday, kind of thing. So there's the week delay in the results. The logs contain information about what happened, the type of crime, the location, including latitude and longitude, timestamp. In Chicago specifically, there's also information about whether any arrests were made, whether there was interaction with police officers, some other extraneous details about the events. And then the way the researchers went about it is they started with this log and digitized the city into kind of small areas, roughly 2 blocks by 2 blocks in size, to have this data mapped against almost like I'd call it like a heat map kind of look or feel. But what it's basically mapping is all of these events within those grids. And within those tiles, you've got this string of time series data and different events and different crimes, and seeing how they shape and evolve over time. All of that feeds into this algorithm, and that algorithm basically maps out or creates a complex model about how all of these things are interacting with and relating to each other. And then that point, they're able to make predictions on what's going to happen next. So the example they used is, say that a week in advance of a particular tile, or a week in advance, of a particular tile, plus or minus a day, such as if today being Tuesday, the algorithm can say that next Tuesday or next Wednesday, on the intersection of these two locations, there would be a homicide, like a rough prediction of the type of event occurring at a certain time within this tiled location. So to answer your question, it's sort of scary and sort of not, because the only thing it's able to predict is a type of event occurring within a roughly 2 block by 2 block radius with a certain amount of accuracy.
Yeah, what it's doing today is not so much scary. It's what is it opening the doors to that, and that's so many other things. And maybe it's just, I don't have a lot of trust in our government and how slowly they move, and so we're in a decently functioning government, a non-corrupt government, like it would be less scary. Where it's like, hey, there's like, if my first thought is it's like, so I feel like so many people are like, well, if you just don't do crimes, you'll be okay, and getting into the, I haven't seen my Minority Report, but I know enough that it's like getting into the, like, we're going to arrest you before you commit your crime is like a, slap in the face. It is, the opposite of what our Constitution guarantees to us. So,
right.
That's where it's the implications or the future direction that it could possibly take that is the scary part, not the, hey, we can predict this here, based on statistics.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of ways I can also view this as being used maliciously, or maybe not maliciously, maybe just erroneously in a way that causes harm or harmful behaviors. So I don't want to dismiss that either. There are plenty of reasons that it could become scary. I think I was focusing more on at the moment, it's really just really advanced statistical analysis.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the same problem that we'll face with self-driving cars. I was like, self-driving cars are going to be so much better almost all of the time relative to human drivers. But then there's going to get, there's the problem, the self-driving car problem, which is not a modification of the trolley problem, but the trolley problem, how AI has to deal with the trolley problem. I was like, does the AI choose this or that? And with enough, given enough time, AI will have to make that decision, and then it's like, all right, what do we do? How do we handle that?
And I would assume that decision would always be weighed on the least number of people harmed.
Yeah, or the combined years of the people harmed. I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, what do you program into the AI?
So interestingly, the team had another model that they also mapped out that looked at police response to crime by analyzing the number of arrests following incidents and comparing those among neighborhoods, and found that crime in wealthier areas resulted in more arrests, while arrests in disadvantaged neighborhoods dropped. Interestingly, though, crime in poor neighborhoods did not lead to more arrests, and the way that's interpreted is one, obviously a bias in police response between the wealthier neighborhoods and the poorer neighborhoods. But the other thing that this pointed to that was interesting is that when you, and I'm going to quote one of the researchers here, we're seeing that when you stress the system, it requires more resources to arrest more people in response to crime in a wealthy area, and draws police resources away from lower socioeconomic status areas. So the bias in response also introduces a shifting of resources away from areas where it could potentially be needed.
So one of the things that I was thinking, that I wasn't sure if this was gonna be playing into it, but I was expecting something along the lines of, certain neighborhoods are over-policed, and that result in bogus arrests. And so I was wondering I wondered how that was going to play into it.
Yeah, and since it did not detail, what data was consumed, or how any data was stripped from the study or anything, I'm only considering that most likely the arrests that they're mapping were specific to the crimes that were also mapped, and that if it was not related to a crime that was already mapped, it was left off as like a traffic violation or something else. Like my expectation would be that there was some other mechanism for flagging those built in to be able to not have the data skew toward just higher police presence in a specific block. But at the same time, that may also be part of where digitizing the city into those, 2 block by 2 block radius or roughly squares might have had an impact as well. I don't know. It's the kind of study that the social scientist in me would love to get my hands on, and I may actually see about reaching out and requesting a copy of the paper, if nothing else. And at the same time, I wonder how much of it's going to be over my head at this point.
Yeah. The abstract should be out there, right?
It should be. I don't know of any academic papers, though, that you can't reach out to the people who performed the analysis, and they're not pretty happy to get you a copy of the paper.
Oh, yeah.
The published paper. I would also expect, potentially, because of the subject matter, I might even be able to reach out to a previous professor and ask for a copy.
Yeah, they might have access to the journal it was originally published.
So I know as we were talking about the potential ramifications and scariness of how the original focus of the topic, the crime mapping or crime predicting algorithm, could be leveraged. I think there's a lot that we could unpack there from a theoretical perspective. But I think you specifically had something you wanted to kind of hone in on. Is that correct?
Yeah, there was the idea is that, so, I initially focused on our government's inability to keep up with technology, and I don't foresee this being any different. And at best, we'd have reactionary laws passed to protect the rights of the people. But generally speaking, I would expect that, much like the TSA, wants to find out what's going on with my shampoo. Similar style measures would be put in place, much like the Patriot Act, where it's like, yeah, this is for protection and it's for freedom and protection, and really it is, there are a lot of things that were problematic about that, and the invasion of privacy, or the potential invasion of privacy, or the what it allowed for, not necessarily what was practiced, but what it allowed for, and was problematic. And the other side of that coin is the people. The people are, I made a comment like, if you don't do crimes, they won't arrest you. You won't get in trouble, and it's that kind of mentality is not okay. Like it's hugely problematic, because it's a violation of what we expect. Well, not any sort of born with right, but as a people, we've agreed that this is a right that you have if you are a citizen here, and even if you're not a citizen here, you have protections, because because we've decided that we're going to treat people with this sort of respect to their privacy. And I see people, a big group of people, maybe a majority of the people, I'm not sure, but at least there's a vocal group of people that say, we'll give up certain freedoms for protection, whether they realize that's what they're doing is giving up those freedoms for protection. They don't want to. They don't want to see who's behind the curtain. They don't want to even recognize that the curtain's there. They just want to live and, live in their privilege and their ignorance. So that's a concern I have, that there wouldn't be enough people upset about an invasion of privacy.
It's interesting. There are a couple of things I want to kind of pull out of that. One, and I didn't include this in my original bullet points because I wasn't sure if it was going to be applicable or if it was just going to be something to have readers stumble across as they went and followed the links. But one of the things that the researchers have been adamant about is that this should not be a reactive law enforcement tool. That the entire purpose of this endeavor was to help inform social policy. And so I'm just going to read the quote. It's, quote unquote, "This does not just involve stepping up enforcement and sending police officers there. There are other ways of intervening socially so that the odds of the crime occurring actually go down, and ideally it never happens." The reason I wanted to pull that out is because that's part of the concern, right? And one of the things that you kind of shifted around was policy in general, talking about the lack of faith or trust in the government. Part of that, though, I think is more concerning under a lot of under the current, or within the current political climate, because of the way the Supreme Court has issued rulings and determined a number of different cases to hear and ways to, whether they want to admit it or not, become a part of day-to-day political interactions instead of being an arbiter of a constitutional law. It's very easy to see something like this end up challenged and subsequently ruled to be used in a completely unrecognized fashion as an invasion of potential freedoms or liberties on specific dates or something, if it travels through the courts and things are acted upon in a way that we don't necessarily foresee now. And I tried to kind of be careful not to give a specific example of anything, because that's so wildly theoretical with how early in development the algorithm and everything else is as well. We're talking about 8 cities and whether or not it can be replicated across more cities, and there's a lot that still would have to be done before it even gets to the point where we could consider it being an issue. It should theoretically be a completely different court by that point. But there are a lot of things the court has done that were unexpected or unforeseen, perhaps, that is now shaping other spheres and areas in a way that we didn't anticipate. And so part of this kind of wild ride of a tangent is just to help illustrate the concerns about the government aren't as clear-cut and obvious as we think they are either. We can talk about the government not having a good track record with technology, but prior to recently, we wouldn't have talked about the government not having a good track record with sticking with the precedent of law, or other things that have been very much taken for granted up until now.
Right.
And so you almost have to dissect each branch of government for potential questions or faults or lack of trust, instead of just thinking, well, historically, they haven't done real well with regulating or implementing new technologies, and that's where the concerns lie. Now you really have to think about what would be a congressional concern versus a judiciary concern, and what would be maybe executive misuse versus Department of Justice misuse. And it's so much more difficult to unpack than the simple example of the government hasn't had the greatest track record with technology. And so there's, right? And I'm not wanting to make light of the concern either. It's a very valid concern. It's just, as you were describing it and as you were kind of going through it, it's like, I immediately, because of the past year, have so many other places where I now have concerns. And it just kind of illuminated that. I had not thought of that prior to you outlining that set of concerns.
Yeah, I always start with that one because it's one that's been around for a while. The developments of the past month and a half they haven't entered my my go-to, these are my concerns, list, my list of my shit list, if you will. Because I'm really glad that you point those things out, but it's just historically in my adult life in the 21st century, our government has been terrible at protecting the freedoms, not the freedoms, but protecting the privacy of citizens and not being reactionary and not and not placating not placating, but they have been bought and sold. Our Congress is bought and sold by so many industries that they don't represent people. If anything, the overturning of Roe versus Wade represents a certain group of people but it doesn't represent the majority of people. It doesn't represent most.
It does not represent the outcome if it were put to a public vote.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
I mean, that's a good way to summarize it, right? The entire point of the framework of government as we know it within the United States, let's make sure we clarify, is that it should be a representative government of the people. It should have the people's interests in mind, and it should be a reflection of what the majority of people in the country want. And remember, the majority is 50.1%. The majority is not 70-80%. I think that's something that we lose sight of often when we use the term majority-minority as well. But a strict numerical majority of voting age citizens is what government should reflect as far as general leanings and path and direction. And it hasn't been that way in a while.
Right. So this kind of, I had thought about putting this in our notes for this week, but I didn't feel like I could make a topic of it. But we're about to go right into it. And there's a group of this was from CNN Politics, and they reported about a group of Republicans and Democrats that are looking at forming a new political party to appeal to moderates. In 2008, when Obama was running for the first time, there was a moment where I thought the alt-right, uber conservative sect of politics was going to split away from the Republican Party. I don't know that they were trying to. It was sort of an organic formation. There was the Tea Party, and it's cute, but they named themselves after the people that that they are idolizing in a particular way from particular learning of our founding fathers, and they wanted to be the radicals, the patriots, the rogues. What was it? The rogues that were gonna get us back to our American roots, and so they called themselves the Tea Party, after the Boston Tea Party. And I think this is sitting here on the outside just watching it happen, it just looked like that the Republican Party was like, no, we cannot let this happen, because we will lose forever and they will lose forever. It's not so much that I think they were concerned that the Tea Party was going to grow in numbers and have outnumber them, but it was just like they knew splitting their party meant that Democrats were going to start to win every time, basically by default. And it wouldn't have been so bad.
It was a significant enough movement to put the Republican Party at a numerical disadvantage.
Yes.
It's the easier way to summarize that.
Thank you. So, the Republican Party, reabsorb them into themselves like an amoeba and poison them. They poison their party with them, and so that they wouldn't lose all the time. And now I think at the same time, around this time there was less movement, but there was like the Coffee Party, which was going to be like the far left party. And I really think that if we had 4 relatively balanced parties, that would be okay. But I think what would have happened was that you'd have a strong Democratic Party. Maybe who knows what the Tea Party would have done. But we probably wouldn't have seen Trump elected to president. I don't know. But the idea of taking what the Republican Party has become, what the Democratic Party is, and just sort of like trying to carve out hey, reasonable people or moderate people, what do you do? That I find really interesting.
Yeah, I had not seen that, so I will look that up as well.
I'll send the link to you. I'll put it in our notes.
And this is partially my just naivete about labels on a lot of things, because I just can't grasp looking at politicians through labels most of the time, unless it's very clear from a behavior perspective that a label fits. And this does, of course, tie into my issues with labels in general, but isn't that concept kind of what the idea of being a libertarian formed from? Where there was more of a common sense mindset to specific policies and general approaches, but still a deference or general regard held for attempting to maintain established values as they were kind of outlined within the framework. It's a flawed logic, but isn't that kind of where that movement also originated in trying to, or is that more of a philosophical leaning within the realm of politics?
I don't think we can describe it as political. I think some people, I don't know. I'll say that. Let me start by saying I don't know. I feel like it gets lumped in with political ideologies, but I don't think it's actually. I mean, there's certainly political tendencies or inclinations or words. I understand how it gets rolled into, hey, this is a political movement, but I think it's more of like a set of ideologies that might inform a particular political sway, but it's a lot of leave me alone kind of stuff. And maybe it's just I don't know that many libertarians that are well spoken for the positions and ideologies of that are appropriately affixed with that label. So I'm not sure. Because I wasn't sure, I went ahead and at least looked up the definition. And I'm just going to read verbatim real quick. Libertarianism is a kind of politics that says the government should have less control over people's lives, based on the idea of maximum liberty, hence the name. So it would be a political philosophy erring on the side of giving the choice to people instead of creating a rule or regulation governing behavior. Yeah. I feel like there's
So not what I was thinking at all.
Okay. Yeah, I find a lot of problems with that. I feel like it's like, oh, where I go to in my head, it's like, oh, let the free market take care of itself. The free market will take care of things, and people will be okay. I'm like, no. What the free market does is it says in 2008, hey, we're so big we can't fail. If we fail, we'll destroy our entire economy. Please bail us out. We get bailed out, and then in 2020, when the supply chains are all foobarred, it's like, hey, supply chains are all foobarred, and so we're going to have to raise prices, and inflation. We're going to cause inflation to go up, and but we're also going to make record profits. That's what the free market's doing right now, and if you're going to get bailed out, then you need to get capped on your profits.
Well, I mean, I think this is one of those areas where we like to talk about the idea of capitalism and a free market economy as being synonymous, but they are not.
Exactly.
And we, the collective we, being the United States, do not do a very good job of educating people about anything other than the interpretation needed to let things continue to be. For example, capitalism, that's it, right? That it's either capitalistic focused economical framework and execution, or it's socialist. That there's no understanding of all these different things that make capitalism be the approach that it is versus what it means to have different types of economical models within a capitalistic society. And I know it's a shortcoming. I'm even falling over my words trying to remember which words I'm supposed to use with which pieces, right?
Right.
Framework versus model versus et cetera, right? But I at least do know at a high level the differences. Or at least that the differences exist. I couldn't name them, but I have general perceptions of models based on learning stuff about them over 2 decades ago.
I'm really curious to know how Gen Z is going to deal with this because we're just now getting adults in the world that didn't grow up during the Cold War. To say that right now, it's like, that's so long ago. That's so old timey. But from right after World War II, we went directly into the next war, and it was a very successful war that we won. That the United States beat the Soviets. It took, I'm trying to do them 40 years. Did I do that right? 40-ish years.
That sounds right.
You could roughly say, let's say, post World War. So let's say 1946 through 1989. We'll say that the end of the Cold War, the Berlin Wall fell. Germany was reunited, was it the end or the beginning of 1989? I cannot remember. I think the end of 1989.
I don't remember for sure where in the year.
Yeah, I know it was cold.
Is that officially recognized as the demarcation point between?
Oh well. No, because
that's
the Soviet,
where I get fuzzy.
Well, the Soviet Union, I don't know when so that's the thing, we were kids. I don't know exactly when the Soviet Union fell because people were horribly promiscuous with their terms, and Russia, even though Russia did not exist did not exist again until the 90s, I think. My whole life, it was Americans versus the Russians, and it was really confusing to me as a kid to be like, what's not knowing the Soviets, USSR, and Russia. I thought the R in USSR stood for Russia. So,
yeah, I remember thinking that as well, and I remember being much older than I thought I should be when I realized that USSR was actually the overall location,
because it included all those Eastern Bloc countries, I think.
Right.
Like where we now recognize Ukraine and and I don't know if Poland was part of the USSR, but Hungary was.
Moldova? Wasn't Moldova part of it as well?
I expect so. Belarus, probably not Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Georgia, Lithuania.
I mean, there were some countries that didn't even exist until post dissolution of the USSR.
Yeah. So I mean, all of these, it would have been. So I think the way I remember actually appropriately being described was, it was Russia and the Eastern Bloc countries. They talk about. I remember reading about the Iron Curtain. I don't know if you remember the Adventures of Pete and Pete.
Vaguely.
Yeah, there was like, and I don't even remember it well enough, but in somewhere during the Adventures of Pete and Pete, I remember there being something where they went behind the Iron Curtain, and I had no idea what the Iron Curtain was, but I definitely pictured a literal Iron Curtain in my head. And I was like, it's more of a wall.
I can understand that.
Yeah. I mean, kids, so. Yeah, so it was 1990 and 91 when they when the Soviet Union broke up. It looks like Lithuania was the first to leave, maybe, if I'm glancing at this correctly, but it would have been Lithuania in 90. It was like Georgia, Estonia, Latvia, Ukraine, Moldova, Kyrgyzstan, yeah, the Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Belarus, Russia, and Kazakhstan. Kyrgyzstan and Turkmenistan, they always sound like fake countries. I apologize for any of our Kyrg or oh man, I do not know their demonyms. These names are so hard, but I apologize to the listeners from those countries for feeling. Turkmen is for Turkmenistan. That's their demonym, and I have to look up the Kyrg demonym because that's Kyrgyz or Kyrgyzstani. I apologize to our Kyrgyzstani and Turkmen listeners for feeling like your country is a made-up country. My apologies. I also didn't realize that the founding of the Soviet Union was well before it was before the First World War. I mean, it makes sense now with the fall of the Tsar. That was at the beginning of the 20th century, like but I forget about it. I just don't think about history in the first half of the 20th century because the middle of the 20th century is so dominates history in my mind because I used to love watching World War II propaganda videos.
It's one of those things that at this point I almost feel like I need to go pick up a modern history textbook just to see how it is now recounted. Like I'm curious how much I just don't know. But at the same time, I know I'm not going to turn around and read a history textbook.
Yeah, you need to find
like
a good history book or maybe a good documentary that's like, hey, this is how this is what happened in the 20th century. 20th century history is pretty interesting.
I can't help but think about all the different memes I've seen that have talked about what future history books are going to look like with a compendium the size of a single volume to cover 2020 through 2022.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I don't remember what that conversation stemmed from.
Oh, it was from oddly, it stemmed from a third political party. I'll read.
That's right.
I'll there's a good quote here, and it was from Andrew Yang. Is like there's There's an article about him called Andrew Yang is breaking up with the Democratic Party and is now an independent. And he said, political extremism is ripping our nation apart, and the two major parties have failed to remedy the crisis, unquote. It was written by, that was an excerpt from an op-ed in the Washington Post that was written by Yang, David Jolly, Christine Todd Whitman. And they went on to say that today's outdated parties have failed by catering to the fringes as a result, and most Americans feel they aren't represented. And I think he's absolutely right. I like to think of myself as a very liberal person, and I'm probably very liberal in some areas, but I'm probably more moderate than I think that I am. But anyway, this article goes on to talk about how they take issue with the focus on the two parties focusing on their fringe constituents or voters, and they want a new party, and they're interested in taking on gun issues, climate change, abortion, and including the ending of gerrymandering and voting right, nationwide protection for voting rights. So I don't really care what party anyone's from. I don't care if you're the Republican Party, the Tea Party, the Coffee Party, the Democratic Party, a new party. If you're doing the right thing, I'm going to support that. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap. All right, I left a pause just because I wanted to also interject and say that modern political parties haven't failed. Like, this has been a warning since day one.
And by day one, you mean George Washington, right?
Yes. And so, like, I was curious, do I need to add that in, or am I going to be okay with that quote at the end instead? And I think ending with the quote is probably good, and let this be the beginning of the after show.
Cool.
Just so I get it, stated that I wanted to put that in there.
Oh, yeah.
Just so I don't feel bad. But I don't think it flows as well.
Yeah. I think it's a good idea.
I do too. I'm very curious about it, and I'm surprised it didn't come across my radar. But I also, I alluded to it when we talked earlier, like scheduling wise, my past week has been a bit of a blur compared to normal. So depending on how recent the article was, I may have just not have caught up yet.
Well, my friend Ethan shared it with me, and it's from July 28th actually. So interesting. So
that's at least close enough to fit into my messed up schedule.
Yeah. Because you guys were on the road this past weekend, right?
Yeah, and so Sunday we drove up to Nashville to pick Jacob back up and drove back home. And then Saturday was literally trying to get everything done for the weekend that we normally get done for the weekend after having spent the night downtown for the whole just kind of mini vacation. So it was I really haven't caught up on anything since Thursday, which would be the 27th?
Thursday was the 28th.
28th.
Yeah.
Yeah, so falls in line with last time I really paid attention to much of anything.
Makes sense.
And even then, Thursday was pretty packed because Thursday was work and then finish up with stuff for work in order to go meet some other people for, drinks and dinner.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of that stretch of each day being fairly packed.
Did you guys...
And then I think tomorrow is really my first breather in the evening, except I'll have a show to edit, of course. But
did you guys take Friday off?
no.
No. Okay.
So we were supposed to
talk about something entirely different.
Show.
Yeah.
Like I don't really know a topic. That's probably step one. I think the rest of it is pretty easy to plan around if we just identify what we really want to focus in on.
I mean, I feel like what we've been doing is that's what our show is now. You know?
Yeah, it makes you wonder if we shouldn't actually consider, I don't know if rebranding is the right thing, but a different tagline that kind of emphasizes where we've turned toward.
Well, 101 is probably a good place to start with that.
Yeah. Or maybe we just embrace the tagline more, because it's been mentioned tongue-in-cheek a couple of times, but it doesn't get referenced enough to really be associated with a brand.
A brand.
Yeah. At this point, there's nothing that really evokes a specific thought without it being explained, right? Like the name is obviously vague, and the tagline is almost as vague. Like, unless you know us or the content of, the past 50 episodes, there's nothing to hone in on what the show is about.
That's true. But I can't think of, it's because I'm not feeling clever at the moment, but I can't think of what we would.
Well, there's kind of two pieces there too. Like, part of me doesn't want to change an established look and feel and theme and everything else, because it works and it gives us the option to take random digressions or whatever, which I think is important.
Yeah.
But there is something missing from, if you listen to the show and still don't really have just a one-liner to explain the show, that's kind of a failure on our part.
Right.
And I feel like whatever that one-liner is needs to become more of a integral part of each episode. Not necessarily repeated every episode verbatim, but something that is able to be latched onto and understood from each episode.
Yeah, kind of not a biography, but like a bio bite kind of thing.
Yeah. And so part of me kind of thinks 101 is just a identity finding mission conversationally for that one-liner.
Yeah.
But I think that's only really interesting to us.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. How are you feeling about the format that we've been using?
I'm always kind of curious about changing it. Like, it's nothing that I have wrong with the format. It's that I always am curious if there's not some better format to use.
Okay, that's good to hear, because I feel the same way. Like, I don't feel like the format that we're doing is bad or wrong, or like, I think it's a good format actually. But
so what I do like is trying to have the categories that are outlined, like where the only thing that I'm really changing is the show topic piece.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about that being kind of how the episode flows, regardless of the amount of time dedicated to each piece or digressions or anything else. But I like that consistency, even if it's not always perfectly consistent with that, because I do like the idea of having some transitional points within the episode so that it doesn't sound as unplanned.
Well, so interesting. That is kind of a thing I was thinking about. And I thought about, like, all right, we when we started, we're like, this show we could have a 3-hour episode, it's our show. We can do whatever the hell we want. And that's true. And then we got to a place where it's like, well, we need to keep this under an hour. And then I thought about past few weeks, maybe longer, I don't know. But I was wondering about what if we changed our format such that we get on the call and we spend a little bit of time brainstorming what we're going to make the show about and then record the show. And maybe we end up with a shorter show, which it's more palatable to regular folks, I think. I think, even under an hour is still daunting for people, which is like...
Yeah, that's something that I have heard multiple times.
So I'm like, I was like, how short do we get it? Maybe we get it, So first of all, I've come to the conclusion in my head that this is a feelings podcast. This is about, here's a thing, here's an issue, here's a thing that's come up, and it's not a political podcast. I think some people would be like, are you sure it's not a political podcast? Oh no, we talk about politics all the time. We talk about government. We talk about things like this all the time, but it's more of a feelings podcast than anything else. And I'm wondering, we can continue to record the whole thing, but I'm wondering if we spend more time sitting with each other talking about things in a pre-show in a pre-show section where we don't intend to record any of this unless something, and then we actually put out a shorter, more polished show.
So I think I've thought about the same end result from a different perspective.
Tell me.
Because one of the things that I keep coming back to is I've got to do a better job of at least planning for conversation pieces.
Right, you say that, but I was like, that shouldn't be all you.
Well, I get it. It's just like, from my perspective, I know I'm horrible at it, and if nobody's doing it, then like it's even worse. It's more a matter of I
agree.
If I at least do a good job of providing some notes and overview prior to, last minute day of, then that would lend itself to create a more polished final product because it's something that was at least thought about more than 30 minutes to an hour in advance.
Well, I'm wondering if we does it make sense in your head to get together on the call and say, hey, here's an article I found, here's an article, let's talk about this for a minute. How do we want to talk about this in the show? What are the key topics? And just have like a planning, a short show planning so that it can still be, I don't know, fit. It's like, let's put out something more polished, but not make it seem more polished. I don't know. It's like,
well, like the line that I keep thinking about is, okay, we have a night a week pretty much dedicated to capturing the audio, right? I have at least a night a week dedicated to editing and administrative tasks in general. So be it creating the page that gets published, on the website, or the show notes, or the actual editing. Like, even if we're only talking about a couple of hours total, that's one night a week that I'm dedicating that to. And so if I add another night for like research or whatever else, like it just becomes a more compounding effect on time. So I keep walking this line between do I do this, or do I kind of keep the winging it approach? Like, that has been a constant conversation in my mind. So I get that the end result is, or the end goal is, to make the final product seem more polished. It's just a matter of how do we get to a more polished product while being mindful of extraneous projects as well.
Yeah, my thought was, and that's kind of, in my mind I didn't articulate it, but the driving force was like, I'd rather put out a slightly better 30 minutes than a less better 60 minutes, where instead of like putting out 60 minutes of content, put in 60 minutes of time and get 30 minutes of slightly better content out, because the first 30 minutes we spent discussing, hey, these things, where we want to go with it, and have a more, I don't want to necessarily say a more focused show, but not to have to basically what it does is it prevents it from being having to be edited in such a way like this. Like we could do the same thing through editing. It might have some problems just because of interrupting the flow of conversation, but I think that we could spend some of our final show recording time prepping. That was my thought.
Yeah, I agree. I think the biggest question is, what do we actually think works for what the show should, what form the show should be consumed as? So does it need, 10, 15 minutes of work a couple of times a day, 2 or 3 days leading up to it? Or do we think talking through pre-recording and then recording is going to yield the same result? And all of that comes down to how prepared we are to come to the table with links and everything else, versus maybe it's not any kind of material that we're drawing from, but this is the topic and kind of what do you think about it? Or, all of that is to say that I don't know that there's a clear answer. Because I think it's going to potentially be different week to week depending on the subject matter, because some subjects are going to require at least some level of research and understanding. And I think that's been the part that's been missing. When it feels less cohesive is when we're having to pause or searching for things real time, or talking through what's remembered of a definition or something like that. Not having the information handy.
Yeah. What if we do a test next week?
I mean, I'm certainly good with trying multiple different ways that we approach it. I think the one thing that I have a question on would be overall format. Do we want to try to focus on just a topic a week and maybe not be as concerned with, filling a rough hour time slot? Or do we want to keep the same topic, and if it fills an hour, it fills an hour, but if not, it's cut short or goes long, or, whatever. Be continuing to be flexible on the time and keeping the follow-up to bites to topic format, or strip that and start and do a trial with just the topic.
That's what I was kind of, I hadn't articulated this to myself, but I think what I was feeling was if there's follow-up, something that we deem important to follow up on, that can be added at the beginning of every show. But we really don't do follow-up. And when we do follow-up, it's pretty short.
Yeah.
And so I feel like if there is follow-up, that can go at the beginning of the show. But I really feel like those are one-offs here and there. I think there have been many times where bites have turned into topics. And I think I want to try, let's get on the call. Here's the topic. Let's discuss the topic. Make sure it's let's not have to look up, let's not look up the demonym of the people of Kyrgyzstan and Turkmenistan. I might want to, and if for, that is not something that in a planning session that I would have been able to foresee, and then I could have just let that go, and just be more intentful about this is what we planned on. Here are the we could have bullet points that we want to hit on, and discuss the topic. And if it's a 20-minute topic, it's a 20-minute topic. If it's a 45-minute topic, it's a 45-minute topic. But just kind of putting out there something like I'm thinking about, like, again, we got on here for ourselves, and I'm having a good time doing what we're doing. But it would also be, I know, there's a handful of people that do listen to the show, but I also would not hate it. Like, it would also be fun and rewarding to put something out into the world that not necessarily appeals to the masses, but it's something where it's like, hey, go listen to this 15-minute podcast about this topic. I think you will like it. And people say, oh, yeah, I could listen to a 15-minute podcast. So,
yeah, I think I've mentioned it once or twice. I think both of us have alluded to it a couple of times. Like, there's a lot of thinking about the next step in the evolution of what it actually means to be a content creator versus just recording something for ourselves.
Right. And it's at this point, it's like we've done the recording for ourselves. We started this during the pandemic because we didn't have these conversations went away for 6 months because we started in September, I think.
Yeah.
And so, all right, that, that itch has been scratched. I'm like, it's like, I was thinking about it. It was like, I think it was last weekend was with some people. We were talking about so I have one friend who asked me about the podcast. I'm like, yeah, going strong. We record every week. We haven't missed a week. We're about to hit 100 episodes. And he's like, that's awesome. And, but then it's also like, I can't be like, you should go listen to every episode. And it's just like, I don't think that you're, it's like, if I don't think you're a person who listens to, like, an hour podcast, again, this came up and it's like, your podcast is an hour long. And I was like, yeah, we cut it down to an hour. And they're like, you cut it down to an hour? I was like, oh, the podcasts that I listen to regularly are all over like 2 hours. Like, their normal runtime is 2+ hours. So I was like, I listened to one recently that was 3+ hours. They're like, 3+ hours? I was like, have you ever heard of Dan Carlin and Hardcore History? I stopped listening to him in 2010 because he was finishing up, I can't remember which wars. It wasn't the Punic Wars. I don't remember. But he was like, he had done 4 episodes, and like the 4th episode was 5 hours long. And I listened to all 5 hours of that. And he's like, okay, I'm going to finish this topic in the next episode, no matter how long it takes. I remember when that episode was released, 14 hours. And I didn't listen to it. And I have not listened to any of his podcasts since then. So,
I mean, I have to admire that he very clearly set the expectation.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. It makes for a good story for me, and I'm just like, I have a friend who he commutes from Hoover to Tuscaloosa. That's an hour. He was like, your podcast is long, and that was when it was under an hour. It's been in the under the hour era. So it's like, do we want to keep doing this show just for us and the handful of people in the form that we do, or do we want to start trying to get people interested? And if that's the case,
it opens up another question.
Yeah.
Do we want to implement seasons?
Oh.
Because if we do, like, so I've thought a number of times about maybe doing seasons focused around some subset of topics, or it being just another logical way to break stuff up, right? So you could have seasons, and of course your episode numbers, but it also makes sense that, like, just because there's an established name and everything doesn't mean that the artwork and presentation can't change. Just because it's the Untitled Podcast doesn't mean that it can't be the Untitled Podcast with a different tagline and a different image that evokes a very specific identity. And so if that needs to change also, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't change the infrastructure. Like, it's still the same URL and everything else.
Right.
But I've thought about that a number of times. And part of it is strictly based around this idea of I kind of want to do something that makes it gives it the potential to be consumed by a much larger audience.
I think
not that it has to, turn into a much larger audience, but it has the right identity for an audience to say, this is why I listen.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. As far as the seasons go, I hadn't thought any about that, and I'm not opposed to it at all. I just hadn't thought about it, and I love the artwork that you have in place now. But something that just occurred to me is that midterms are less than 90 days away. Am I right? Not less than 90 days? Yeah. August, September, November, October. Yeah, less than 90 days away. Or just at 90 days. And I feel like that's what we'll be talking about a lot. I think we're going to ramp up into that.
Probably.
So at this point, we've talked about it. Do we need to sleep on it and revisit this conversation before next Tuesday?
Probably. Because I feel like part of it still hinges on identifying the topic to be able to actually have something to guide the rest of it. All the rest of it makes sense. There's nothing about it that seems
so the content
like it wouldn't be. Yeah. But without the content, none of it really matters.
Right. So if we know that this is, so whether, we've never said it before, but again, this is a feelings podcast about here's what I feel about this topic. Here's what I feel about Chicago and 7 other cities predicting where crimes are going to happen.
I'll have to think about it a little bit, but I think that's more or less the change. We've got unqualified, unfiltered, and I can't even remember exactly. I'd have to pull up the damn artwork.
It's
that's the whole point, right?
Right. Unqualified. Yeah. Oh man, now I can't remember either, and I just looked at it.
But adding feelings to that, or changing to
underrated.
Yeah, changing it to just unqualified, unfiltered. Here are feelings, or something. Just that little bit of a change.
Oh man, what if it was unqualified, underrated, filtered and distilled feelings? Because if we're gonna plan a little bit, then it's a little bit filtered, and maybe a little bit distilled because we're going shorter. If we're trying to go shorter and appeal to a broader audience, I don't know.
It's something to think about, but I think that kind of thing is what I was referencing about the whole one-liner.
Yeah.
So a combination of changing the format and that kind of thing to be at least a part of the explanation of the show in some fashion, at least sets us down the path that we're both kind of thinking of.
Can I tell you the artwork that I'm seeing in my head?
Sure.
Same. So the artwork that you have now, just take a napkin, take that same kind of napkin that that unqualified, underrated, and unfiltered is on, crumple it up, put it in the corner so it's still in the shot, and have it written unqualified, underrated feelings, filtered and distilled.
I mean, I still have that napkin somewhere, so
if it's on the edge of the shot, so that it looks like, okay, so that it's changed. I don't know. That was the thought. That was the thinking.
Yeah, I'll think about it. I don't know. I know something there needs to be modified, because right now it's all just vague in general, because that's how it started.
Well, yeah, and I didn't know what to call it before. Is it about? Well, it's not a political podcast. It's not a tech podcast. It's not a philosophy podcast. It's not any of those. It's not any of the topics that we discuss. And that's where I was like, oh, we talk about our feelings about certain issues that are relevant to us in our lives. For a long time, it was our feelings about how people wouldn't wear their fucking masks or get their fucking vaccines.
Yeah. For way too long a time.
And then sometimes we might talk about like labels and how labels are shit because people use labels to exert superiority over other people. I was like, yeah, labels are supposed to be good to help us, communicate our thoughts. And guess what? Here's how we like fuck them up. It's a feelings podcast. And it feels fun to say that to me. What's your podcast about? It's about my feelings.
I can also, like, the other thing is, like, making it a more consistent part of the summary also is a way to reinforce the idea.
Yeah.
There's so many different things I can do with it. It's just now a matter of, really at this point, it's a matter of just sleeping on it and thinking through it again.
Mm-hmm.
Do I still come to the same thoughts? Do I still come to the same leanings toward how to shift that direction? And is there anything that comes to mind finally as a negative?